Welcome back to the Scared Stiff podcast. I am Mike Hawkins, your host, and this is my co-host, Scott Noyce. Just
Hello.
another reminder, on our YouTube channel, we have extra videos pertaining to tangents we go on during episodes or other topics that we want to discuss after the episode. So if you would like to check out more Scared Stiff, go ahead to that YouTube channel and check out those videos. How you doing today, Scott?
I'm okay. I'm a little tired. Oh, actually, you know what? I did want to tell you a story, and I think it'd be fine to tell on the podcast. I went to trivia the other night.
Yep.
It was me, Connor, Nick, and Jason, and Al showed up too. When we were doing it, we were trying to do a name. I was like, dude, I all the names I wanted to pick were it's rated R trivia. So all the names I wanted to pick, it's like, oh, it's too far. It's just not good enough. You got to think of a name the guy's gonna think is funny. We didn't get anything better because what's gonna top Sex with Dad? First of all, the fucking guy didn't
clip
pick
to take
that.
out of context. That's a great clip.
Yeah, like he didn't pick that. He clearly picked the worst possible fucking name. So there's one point in the game for trivia where you have to write out 15 names or whatever and do it within a minute. And there's getting ready for the category. It's like, who here is a big fan of Disney films? And I took the paper from Connor. I was like, I don't fucking care what it is. I got you, boys. This is all me. And let me tell you, it was Disney villains, and you got to write out 15 Disney villains. It would be easy as fucking pie for me to do that, but everyone's yelling at me names, and I can't think if I can't process, right?
Yeah.
And holy shit, I can't think of anything. The only thing I was able to write down on my head was Jafar. But then everyone's like, this, that. And when everyone's yelling names, you can't process yourself.
Yeah.
All I had was, oh, what the fuck's the guy's name from Tarzan? It's Clay. But I can't
Clayton.
think it because all I can think of is Tarzan. And then someone yells a name. And Connor goes, Hades. I was like, okay, I got that. I listened to that. But then Al just kept going, Hades, Hades. I'm like, I know how to fucking spell Hades, bro. He just kept going, Hades. And I got so mad. I'm not kidding you. I got so mad where I literally put the pencil on the table and I screamed, oh! And I just erupted in the middle of the fucking trivia night. And then it's like 5 seconds left. I took the pencil, I grabbed it like this, and I wrote Shrek. We did terrible.
Oh my god, you would.
It was fucking hilarious.
So you said I got this, and they're like screaming names at you, and like I know
if nobody
you.
said anything, I could have written 15 down myself, easy.
Exactly.
I would go in order
you.
from like when the films came out and be like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I know you, so I know that you would have totally done that, probably with time to spare.
It's so bad that like I couldn't even do Captain Hook. Connor had to say Captain Hook for me, and he's like, fucking Peter Pan, Captain Hook. I was like, holy fuck, I can't even think of Captain Hook. Jesus Christ.
Oh, when you get fucking badgered like that, so like it's tough to fucking have a train of thought.
I get it though. Also, like you're not, no one's looking at the names on the sheets. They're just trying to think of names. I get it, but I kind of wish I just said, hey guys, don't talk. I can do this, but it's not how it goes sometimes. But that was really fucking funny. The fucking trivia guy's like, oh yeah, so we got some funny answers here. I'm not gonna read them all, but there's 2 here that I'm gonna give bonus points for because they're technically right or whatever. And it was like Darth Vader and Thanos, and I'm like, you're gonna give bonus points for fucking Thanos, but I don't get a point for Shrek, bro. Come on. DreamWorks is the ultimate Disney villain. Let's be real. But yeah, that was my little story I had to tell. I thought it was funny. I wanted to mention
that's funny. That's really funny. I would have loved to have come to trivia. It's just that's a hike for me.
Grow up.
No.
How's your day going?
That's okay. I literally just started, so that's pretty good. You know, about half hour ago I got up. So
yeah, I've been editing.
I was supposed to get up at 9:30, and I don't think my alarm went off. I'm a little bit pissed off about that. I am, however, excited to talk about the movie that we're talking about today because you have had an affinity for this movie that I didn't before. Not that I didn't like it, but it was a movie that I watched it and I'm like, yeah, it's really good, but I was not as big of a fan of it as you. Things have changed. This time I really came out of it really loving it and enjoying it. So I would like you to introduce the movie based off the fact that you adore it so much, even though the people who are listening to this already know the title of it because it's the title of the podcast, but whatever.
This movie that we're going to talk about is Curse of Frankenstein. I'm a big fan of all of the interpretations of all the classic horror monsters, but Curse of Frankenstein is not my favorite of the Frankenstein mythos. My favorite is still Bride of Frankenstein. I still adore the
Same.
first Frankenstein, but I think Curse of Frankenstein is one of Hammer's best purely because they take things in a different direction, just like they do with Horror of Dracula and a lot of their other films. But they really do benefit from keeping things simple, fleshing out characters, going in a new direction, but also making the characters feel very real and distinct. I love Van Helsing in Horror of Dracula, but I don't love Dracula. In this film, when you have the two antithesis characters being Victor Frankenstein and the monster or the creature in this one, Victor Frankenstein is not like the other Victor Frankensteins. He's an absolute sociopath that'll do anything he wants to get what he feels he deserves by the end of the film. In the creature, not nearly as sympathetic or as great as Boris Karloff. He's not even like he's not even close to being as sympathetic. He's not supposed to be like the, oh well, you feel bad for it. You don't feel bad for him. This guy does just go out and kill. He's just a monster at the end of the day, and there's nothing that stops him. But you do feel bad because a lot of things that cause that aren't his fault, or like
They're out of his control.
the brain getting damaged, his fucking eye getting shot, and all these things that really do make him more complex and more distraught mentally. Like,
I also
not
think that
surprising.
this time around, watching that monster, because like I the first time I watched the movie, I'm like, yeah, I really enjoyed the movie based off of Frankenstein himself, because it's a completely different take on the story, because it, rather than the first one really, like the 30s one, it was more of it's about the monster more than it's about the man. And in this one, the monster is the man, arguably, but it's about Frankenstein rather than the monster, which recontextualizes it all very differently. And when you get to the monster, the late great Christopher Lee, he brings it's not something that wasn't there with the Boris Karloff version, because the Boris Karloff version was very sympathetic. And I wouldn't say that this version of the monster is nearly as sympathetic as that one, but when you think about it from the perspective of something born into this world with a partially non-functioning brain, it does become kind of sad, because his aggression, the things that he does, it's not something that it's not a choice. It's a matter of his brain just saying, this is what we're going to do, because it's damaged. And I think Christopher Lee himself really sells that in his performance, because I remember when I watched this the first time, I didn't really like, the monster was like the least interesting part of the movie. But this time around, watching Christopher Lee in the role, yes, he doesn't really get a whole lot to do, but the things that he does, especially in his performance, because you can see in his face this anguished confusion, it just doesn't understand what's going on. I found his performance very, very interesting this time around.
I wouldn't even just say the facial features or the way he emotes with just his face. I would also say a lot of the body movements. There's the scene where he tells him to sit up and then and sit down. The way Christopher Lee emotes with his body, it makes it feel like it is this like creature's first few months learning how to walk or learning how to do these things on a command versus being instinctual. I think that's really great, because I mean, Boris Karloff's a very different type of character. His monsters, it's almost knows these things on instinct still, but the abnormal part of him isn't just what to do, it's how to act. But for this one's first instinct is to kill nearly, or his first instinct is just to act purely on instinct, not think. Don't bother with anything. And
I think that's funny, because that seems like the antithesis again to Frankenstein, because Frankenstein does these terrible, horrible, at times violent things that make him a very irredeemable character, who, if this was the only movie in the franchise, gets his own at the end, but it's not. The thing is, the monster kind of reflects that, because his first instinct is violence and forcing things to be the way that he wants them to be. So the first thing he does is he attacks the person who created him, because it's also a measuring of expectations from Frankenstein himself, because he's expecting, oh man. Well, for one thing, he didn't even know that the bastard was alive. He had no idea that the monster was alive at the time, but he was expecting his creation to be perfect. To a degree, that kind of drives him even crazier that it's not, and that his creation attacked him. I think that's a really, really smart way to contextualize that dynamic between them.
what I'm going to do a lot of this film is compare Frankenstein 1931 to Curse of Frankenstein, purely because the way these films are set up is so similar in the way certain characters impact others, but how certain characters also take a limelight in one version versus the other. They are very similar with the way they hit narrative beats, especially, but more so just how character dynamics will influence other dynamics. the Victor Frankenstein that's played by Colin Clive in the first film from 1931, he is not creating this creature out of hate. He's creating it because he's pompous and he wants to play God. But he's also doing it because this is a dream of his. And he is more sympathetic because he doesn't understand the weight of what he's doing. And that entire ideology of not understanding the weight of his decisions impacts his monster. That is what that monster becomes when he's given life. He also does things and doesn't understand the weight of those actions, and he's sympathetic. Whereas this Frankenstein and Curse of Frankenstein will do anything out of just not just a lust for glory, but just like he's bloodthirsty. He'll do anything he can to make what he wants at the end of the day. And anything that gets in his way, he takes it out.
He's a sociopath.
It starts off with just, oh, I need this for the project. But then you see, like, when his maid starts to threaten about going to the police, he'll do anything to get rid of her too.
Yeah.
And that's reflected purely on the monster he creates. The monster he creates also has those same notions in his brain, that the whole idea of giving birth to this creation is the idea of giving life. It's about giving birth. It's about humans using the power to give birth, but not obviously through like childbirth, but through your own creation. It is so even more so because he's in like the little square tube, which is kind of like their idea of like an embryo.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of the traits the monster gets are the worst traits from Frankenstein in both versions, realistically.
I still find it interesting though that aside from Frankenstein himself, generally speaking, at least especially at the beginning, he doesn't attack until he feels threatened, aside from Frankenstein. Because like even with the blind man, he wasn't attacking the blind man. He was just standing there and he was just holding the stick and whatever, and the blind man like shoved the stick at him. Like he's gonna hit him with it, and then he went violent.
Well, we assume
we don't see what happened with the kid.
We don't know about the kid. Yeah,
we don't know about the kid, but also at that point he's in this blind violent rage, and anything in his path is going to be destroyed. So even from that perspective, he definitely reflects Victor Frankenstein, but he definitely is still a much more sympathetic character. He's just a much more sympathetic character because it's really not him so much. It's not the same as the 1930s one, where the 1930s one is pretty much a good soul to a degree. It's just he doesn't understand his own strength. He doesn't understand the world that he lives in. He doesn't understand that he can't just assimilate into the world and just walk around and expect to not be attacked. He is a much more tragic figure in the 30s one, but he is still a sympathetic character here, at least, which I didn't get the first time I watched it. The first time I was just like, oh, he's just kind of the monster. He's just kind of there. But watching it this time, I really, really got into Lee's performance and how smartly the Sangster script that backs this movie actually develops that character.
When I say that they are like one gives birth to the other and he takes on the traits, it's more of in a flip switch type of way, though, because when Frankenstein starts off in Curse of Frankenstein, he is sympathetic. He's just a guy trying to learn and do whatever he can. And he evolves into being a sociopath that'll do anything that gets in his way. Whereas the beginning of the 1931 version of Frankenstein, he really is more
understandable.
No, in the 31, he really is just hell-bent on getting his way. In the 31 version, he has nothing stop him. The first interaction you get with other people is him reprimanding them for being, get out of here, you don't belong here. I'm doing my procedures. This is important. I don't need you. He's very strong. He's very adamant. He's very egotistical. But as that film goes on, he becomes way more sympathetic and he starts to understand, shit, I really realize I've been messing up, which is in Curse, the exact opposite. And you could say the same thing in those films where when you start off with the monster in the 1931 version, he's much more bloodthirsty. He's much more adamant to reflect violence. But as the film goes on, he's less inclined to be violent. His actions could cause violence, but it's not intentional. Well, that's why the end happening with him getting burned down in the windmill, it's like, yeah, but a lot of that isn't to his own doing.
Yeah, but also in the 31 version, if I remember, I haven't seen it in a bit, but he gets fucking like mentally tortured.
Well, yeah.
By Igor.
Yes.
And it's just like
no.
I thought it was Igor.
It's Fritz. Fritz is the
Fritz.
he gets the third movie.
Yeah, he gets tortured by this fucking guy, and to that degree, it's like I understand. I mean, like I know that he still has violent tendencies before dealing with that stuff, but that really exacerbates it. And it's not until he escapes where he starts to experience the world and starts to become cultured or whatever you want to say, where he starts to find his place in the world. And it all sucks that it gets to that scene with the little girl and everything goes tits up after that. But yeah, he's definitely, I agree with about Victor Frankenstein himself in the 30s movie, but I still think that even at his worst at the beginning, he's not even close to this guy
What do you mean, this guy?
in Curse. He's
No,
not even
he's not
close.
close. I'm
I
just
still think that
saying it's a
I can
switch.
still
It's a
see him.
switch.
I can still see him as a human being at his worst in the 30s. Whereas in this one, where the places he goes, like, yeah, the first like 30 minutes of the movie, he's just a driven character. But you could still see, even when he goes to get the dead body that's hanging, you can see this glint of its absolute fucking nutcase behind his eyes. And that's just the beauty of Peter Cushing's performance, because he's just incredible in this. But like, you can see behind his eyes that the absolute just sociopathic tendency, where he's so nonchalant about this guy's dead body, which is like, oh, he doesn't need any of this anymore. It's like, it's mine now. Like, that's crazy to me. And that's not even like his worst. Like, he gets way worse than that. That's before he even kills anybody. So I would still wager, like, and I'm not saying that this is what you're saying. I'm just deliberating a point. Just that, like, they really took this character to an extreme degree as far as his just sociopathic tendencies in this movie. That's a good thing, because it really differentiates it from the previous versions of the character in a really authentic way that is inherently just Hammer's version of it. I found that really, really cool, especially considering that they were not allowed to use any iconography, any kind of stylistic tendencies. They couldn't even call the Frankenstein's monster the monster. He had to be the creature. Like, they were under a lot of legal hamstringing as far as what they could and couldn't do creatively with this film. And they went, in my opinion, the best direction. Instead of focusing on the monster, they focused on the man. And I found that very interesting.
Well, what I'm talking about isn't the difference between the Frankensteins. I'm talking about how the Frankenstein to the monster scenarios is similar for the fact that one will start off sympathetic and then one will turn violent when it comes to Curse of Frankenstein, but I think it's a flip switch when it comes to the original one, because the monster becomes more sympathetic at the end of Frankenstein, the first one.
Yes.
In this one, it's not the same case. In Curse of Frankenstein, he isn't sympathetic at all at the end. Like, you could feel bad for some things that happen to him, but like, he willingly kills. He willingly does whatever he wants. And that's very much created out of the Frankenstein that created him. Like, that's why he acts like that. Still, it's not the same thing as in the original Frankenstein. Victor realizes the mistake he makes and he wants to stop it. And that Frankenstein, at that point, you do feel bad for him, because a lot of these things are kind of outside of his realm of decision making. He doesn't know what he's doing. This monster is just trying to live, and in itself, that is against nature, and that's the whole theme of the movie. Or in this one, it's like the more violence breeds violence. In Curse of Frankenstein, he really does lose all sympathy, and he showcases that with the way he treats people when it comes to Victor Frankenstein. And as the monster gets more and more time, you can feel bad for how Victor treats him, but that monster can't live.
No, I agree. But I would say that even though some of the stuff that he does deems he definitely can't live, that doesn't mean he's not something that you can't feel sympathy for when he.
No, absolutely not.
It's like putting a rabid dog out of its misery. I agree, though. I definitely agree that the way that they take the monster and Frankenstein is completely different. But I still really love that dichotomy between the two. And
that's why I like it so much, is because it is so distinctly different in Curse, but they still follow the same structure as the monster follows in the footsteps of the father. It's just in this film, the father isn't sympathetic. He doesn't turn his route. He sticks his course and he becomes more deranged. And the monster does the same exact thing.
Yeah, I think this movie, more so than the 31 version, really the theme does really come out to be not the theme, but the question the movie really poses is, who is the real monster? Although I think it answers that pretty easily. But I always find that kind of an idea for a movie very interesting, because it's making us look at ourselves and what we as a species are capable of.
I think saying what are we capable of is a great way of putting it, because Victor Frankenstein showcases in this film that he will do literally anything. And when the monster reacts violently, it's not him doing it out of bloodlust. It's him doing it on instinct. There's nothing instinctual about what Victor does. Victor does everything with a point behind his mind saying, this is in my way. It has to go. And that's It's similar with the 31 version. He does a lot of things like that. But this guy, oh man, he wouldn't think twice about beating a child to death if it meant helping form some creation of his. Like,
And the most insane thing too is that like he's pretty much our not protagonist, but he's our main character. And this is the character we're following through these events. We're not following Paul, who's the good
awesome.
guy.
Paul is
I love
awesome,
Paul.
though.
I love Paul. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like, we're not following Paul through this. Our main character is Frankenstein. So the main character of the story is a piece of garbage, a very, very intelligent piece of garbage, but he's a piece of garbage.
I'm glad you brought up Paul, though, because I want to talk about Paul because Paul's a character that doesn't really exist so much in the original Frankenstein. There's another person that clearly loves Elizabeth in the original Frankenstein, but he really isn't a character as much as just being the other guy.
Yeah.
But Paul in this character he's not a protagonist, but he's much more important than a regular supporting character.
He's a voice of reason. He's very important.
Yeah, and he goes along with Victor Frankenstein on this entire journey. He's his teacher. So that's another thing that gets kind of brought up. It's like who becomes the master, who becomes the teacher at the end. And that's why when Victor starts to get to a point where he thinks he knows everything, or he's doing everything, Paul's saying, there's certain reasons why I won't get this far, and I'm trying to stop you, but nothing will stop Victor.
Yeah.
And that sets up a great dichotomy between those two, because Paul does genuinely love Victor. He's a great friend, and he doesn't want him to commit these atrocities. And he's not trying to stop Victor because out of any malicious, jealous, or hateful reason. He just wants his friend to make sure, like, don't go too far. You can't go back after this.
Once you ring a certain bell, you can't unring it.
Exactly.
And that's where Victor is heading, and Paul sees it, and he wants him to not hit that point. But the problem is that after a certain point, Paul can't do anything about it. And it becomes more so about shutting down Victor's creation and essentially he allows his friend to die to his knowledge, because the things that Victor knows cannot be redone. Like he created a monster, and if Victor lives, he'll do it again.
Yes.
Victor doesn't think he's done anything wrong. He thinks that what he's doing is for the betterment of mankind, whereas it really is just to feed his own intellect and his own ego.
It is funny if you think about it. Well, no, not really. I mean, technically, Victor doesn't kill anybody in the movie. He doesn't. He's responsible for her death, but he doesn't kill her.
He pushed the.
Oh yeah, that's true. He fucking straight up.
He fucking shoved him through the banister.
He's old anyway. Someone had to take him out of his misery.
His population control, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
He straight up murdered.
I kind of forgot about that. Because
he straight up murders him.
Yeah, so. No, you're right.
He only gets worse as the franchise goes on too. Like he's a fucking rapist. You know, he fucking just kills so many people. He's just a fucking monster.
He's not a rapist.
I thought didn't he fucking like no something with Peter Cushing. Peter Cushing is a borderline rapist in one of these movies.
It's not this movie. He doesn't rape anybody.
No,
he
not
has an affair with a maid.
Not in this movie. I'm saying as the franchise goes on.
I
thought it was one of the Frankenstein movies, but it's something with Peter Cushing in the Hammer verse.
It's not he plays some fucking terrible characters.
It's not Van Helsing, I'll tell you that much.
No, kind of funny.
I swear to God, it is Frankenstein.
Possibly.
I know it's not this one, but it is later in the franchise. Yeah, no, like I mean, we talked a lot about the terrible things that Frankenstein does in this movie, and his relationship with Paul and all that stuff. I really do want to focus really quickly on Peter Cushing himself, because this is before this movie. As I've read, he was primarily a television actor, and with this movie launched him into stardom. And you and I both pretty much uniformly agree that this might be possibly one of, if not the greatest performances he's had.
Of the ones I've seen. Oh, actually, he's really good in Twins of Evil. If you saw Twins of Evil, he's fucking phenomenal in that. He plays this fucking head of the church who goes around burning women that he thinks are witches, getting rid of all the sins of the town, but he's a terrible fucking bastard. But he has to be the protagonist of the film, and he kind of learns his mistakes. And I'm not saying he's redeemed.
Kind of similar.
Yeah. Oh, he's so much.
No, I'm sure he's worse. I'm just saying it's funny. He plays two bastard characters that are just happen to be the protagonists of the movie.
But in this one, he doesn't get redeemed. He's just death isn't redemption. It's death.
Yeah. No.
In Twins of Evil, it's not like he gets redeemed, but like, you have to side with him versus the monster.
Yeah.
See, if he died in this film, technically, no, like it wouldn't really be a problem. Be like, Yeah, fuck Victor.
Well, the whole point again, like at the end of this movie, is just that Paul allows his friend to die, despite the fact that he knows the knowledge that would save his life.
Yeah,
Because if they allow Victor to live, he will just create the monster again,
yeah,
and we'll be back where we started. So, it's a fucked up ending, but it's the only ending. And now it's a franchise, so it doesn't really matter. But
yeah,
if you just look at this movie isolated, it's the only way that story could end in any way that is a positive.
yeah. It just in Twins of Evil, like he can't die because everybody in the village will be doomed if he doesn't. So I think his portrayal is just as good in that movie, and you should really check that out. But
I will.
that doesn't take anything away from him being fantastic in this film. One of my favorite things is when he talks about getting the brain. If you notice Peter Cushing, when he says like, "I need to get a brain," and he looks at Paul's head, but after he says that,
Yeah, he
and
thinks
I
about
love
it.
that scene because I didn't realize that when I first watched it. I'm like, fuck, he'll take his head. Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah, like it's really Cushing. The way that he sells certain things, like they're like he has like certain lines that like they're just really fucking insane. Especially like it's not actually this line's not even insane. It's just the way that Cushing delivers it. Where you say like how he looks at Paul's head when he says he's gonna get the brain. But I think it's more so like towards the end where he's like, oh, I'll get it. And he just looks so fucking manic. Like he looks like
see,
he's about to murder somebody to get the brain, which
and
he
that
is.
like
So
that's the reason I don't say that scene is because it's clear. You know what I mean? Like it's clear what he's gonna do. He'll get anything. I just love the scene where he looks at Paul's head because it's so subtle and it's a
yeah,
small thing that Cushing does that like if you don't notice it and pick up on it, be like, oh wow, I holy shit, like he means fucking anything.
yeah,
Like there's also another scene that he does that it's just the small things Cushing does that get me because all those big overblown things, they're fantastic and everyone knows. But there's things that I like picking up on the film where I really have to watch it again to notice. When he's saying to the monsters there and hey, let our friend rest, and he just goes for now, and he just kind of walks away from it. It's like okay,
yeah. Because he's not looking at it as a person.
yeah,
Like he's looking at it as a thing.
yeah.
It's his thing. So it's like he could be callous about it.
He's so commanding when
He's
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 there.
he's a mesmerizing fucking charismatic character that is just a bastard. Like he is a terrible person often. And like yes, some of it is because like even Paul tries to make excuses for him, which again like it really reinforces how much Paul is like his friend. Like he really cares about him, that even he kind of downplays how fucking nuts Victor is. He's like, no, he's not crazy. He's just driven by his desire to improve on his monster or whatever. And he's like, no, Paul, he's fucking crazy. He's just nuts. Don't downplay it for your friends. And like I get it. Like that's kind of like a really cool layer to Paul, because I was watching it last night and that scene came up. I'm like, no, Paul, no, he's fucking crazy. Don't downplay it. But it's like that's his buddy, like not buddy, but like that's his
That's his
friend.
like
Like it's
best
somebody he cares
friend.
about. Like he
Yeah,
cares about the guy, so he's not trying to say, "Oh, my best friend is a fucking sociopath." And like I get that. It's just like when I was watching, I'm like, no, that's so stupid. Why would Paul say that? And I'm just like, no, he's a fucking human being. Why wouldn't he try to like downplay that for his friend? But Cushing just God, every scene he's awesome because he has like this descent. Whereas like at the beginning, like he is genuinely just he wants to learn these things so he could be like the foremost of his field. And like again, like on another side of the coin, like Cushing sells the craziness, but he also really sells how smart and knowledgeable this character is. Like he just seems like an intelligent person. And it seems that he was too intelligent for his own good in this. And there's a point in the movie where like any logical person would have said, I'm good, we're done, we should not do this anymore. But he's so focused and driven on playing God and even to the point like even at the beginning of the movie where it's supposed to be it's beginning at the end. He's talking to the fucking priest, and the priest is just like, do you want me to read you your or do you want a spiritual consolation or something? Whatever. I can't remember what the line itself was, but he's like, do you need spiritual guidance, son? And he's like, no, save that for the people. Save that for the people that need it or think they need it.
yeah.
Think they need it. And it's just like he's like, no, he still thinks he's fucking God because he's a scientist. Like just that self-absorbed, malicious attitude that he has. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous how fucking good Cushing is in this.
I think another great comparison with this film is how staggeringly different Elizabeth is versus the first one because she talks about how much she loves Victor, and it's shown throughout the entirety of the film. Victor literally could not care less about her,
Yeah, they're all
which is
lesser
very
than him.
vastly different compared to the original because when the monster does take Elizabeth, Victor does want her back. He's like, oh, no, like that's the one person I really care about. But in this film, when he sees Elizabeth gets captured by the monster, he's like, fuck it, I'll shoot everywhere. I don't care if I hit her.
It's like
He
for a
hits her,
second,
he doesn't think twice. He's like, oh, that's one down. I got another to go.
I was gonna say like it seems for a second like he's like, no, put her down, and it's like, oh man, like maybe he does kind of care, but when he shoots her, he doesn't react
At all.
to shooting. Like he's like, oh fuck, I missed. Like that's his reaction. It's not like, oh no, I shot my future wife. Like, oh no.
I think another thing they were going for is at the end of the film, I believe it's this too, that we were saying like Paul doesn't give the information because Victor will create a monster again. Another way it could play out is very much that like maybe he is just fucking batshit insane.
Well, even either way though, like you're right, where it could kind of be framed.
It's not as far
like
as
that.
American Werewolf or anything, but
No, it's not. It's not as detailed as it is. But I'll say that they do end the movie in a more ambiguous place than
American
the werewolf does, because
Yeah.
werewolf is like, yeah, no, he's a fucking werewolf, guys.
100%.
But you could make an argument. The only problem with that argument is that there's a franchise now. But when this movie came out, yeah, you could make that argument for sure. And if you took
100%.
this movie just isolated,
You
could
can't
just
always
make
look
that
at the
argument.
film singularly coming from that perspective.
I definitely don't think that that's the intention.
No, I
But
agree.
even though it's not the intent, it's definitely something that's left there that you could totally argue, and I would understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I agree. I don't agree with it. I wouldn't say that it is all up in his head, but you can definitely look at it from that perspective. I think it's weird to say comparative to even a film from the 1930s, but I do feel like this Elizabeth is much less of a character.
Yeah, she doesn't really do much.
I mean, she's just very blindly obsessive for Victor, but even a way where it's so devoted for no real cause besides, oh, he supported me. And I get that, but we never see Victor's interactions with you to believe that he's a caring person versus even in the 31 version, like he showcases so many scenes when he's with Elizabeth that he does care a lot for her. So when she does turn a blind eye to him, it makes sense.
Yeah, and like yeah, like in this one, he's like super dismissive of her. He's always leaving the house.
Oh,
she's
yeah.
she's just there. I mean, like they kind of hit on it early in the movie where Elizabeth is like the fact that I wasn't, out on the street to him and all that stuff. Like, and Paul's like, I think you're confusing gratitude with love.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I mean,
No,
might be something there.
that's definitely set up from the beginning, and I think that's great. It's just that's
And
why
she
it's
leaves
hard to
with
get
Paul at the
attached
end.
to Elizabeth in the end when it's like she really isn't much of a character. She doesn't go through anything. She just goes like, "Oh yeah, yep, have fun, cool. Oh, you left the door unlocked. Look, what I'm gonna go take a peek at a gander." And she goes
Yeah.
for a gander, and she woo.
I will say this though, like somebody pointed, because I watched all the special features on the Warner Archives disc last night, and somebody pointed out something that I really wasn't really like paying attention to. Really, it's like he's like, maybe one day, I'll involve you in my experiments or something, and she's like,
Yeah, I remember that scene. It's like,
she's like,
yeah,
I would love to, and she's like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, one day maybe I will, and he just looks at her and smiles. I'm like, oh, that's fucking crazy. That's
yeah,
disgusting. That just made me feel gross. Because it's like they're basically being like, yeah, I'm gonna make you the bride of Frankenstein. Go fuck yourself. It's just like,
yeah.
it's gross. That's so fucking gross. And she's so oblivious to it too. It's so fucking gross.
He doesn't care about her. That's the only thing that really makes him not less sympathetic because he's already not sympathetic, but that's the real big difference between the Victor Frankensteins from 31 and this one is that like
There's no actual romance.
not just there's no actual romance, but there's really no real emotion between a human being and Victor. Like
Other than him and Paul.
he respects Paul though. It's not like
Yeah, but
you
he
feel
still
like
cares about Paul. It's just he's just nuts. Like he does like
if you think the monster took Paul, you think he would think twice before shooting though? You know
yeah.
what I mean?
I
don't
think
think
he
he
would.
would.
I think he might have.
I don't think he would.
Because at the end of the day, like he could so many times he could have killed Paul. Like
Yeah.
he would have solved a lot of problems by
But he
killing
respects Paul. That comes from an intellectual thing versus more of an emotional thing. So I can 100% believe he respects Paul, and that's why he lets Paul get away with certain things, and that's why he comes back to being like, oh yeah, like he helped with my experiments. Like he has gratitude towards Paul for that. Ironically, like how Elizabeth has gratitude towards him. But I don't think there's a place of like genuine love for Paul. Even when Elizabeth says how like, oh, I'm gonna invite Paul to the wedding or whatever, his first instinct is like, I have something to show him. It's not like, oh, Paul, like my buddy. It's more like, yeah, I brought the
Sure.
motherfucker back. Like,
Fair enough.
I think that's what's so crazy is that Paul cares about him. Paul genuinely looks at Victor like he's a friend, a colleague, and like someone very close and personal. And I'm not saying the relationship didn't start out like that, but even from the get-go, you could see Victor has an eagerness to learn, and
Yeah.
Victor has things that he wants to accomplish. And he may respect Paul, but that respect can only go so far, it seems. That's why I don't think if he grabbed Paul, I don't think he would hesitate either, really. At least not the way I interpret the film.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. It seems like there's more of a relationship there, though. I mean, like if we're
There
talking
is.
about flipping, if we're talking about flipping Paul and Elizabeth, I do think that there's a chance that Victor does have a different reaction, especially because it seems like to him Elizabeth doesn't matter. Like she's just there.
She doesn't
Like
matter.
she's just there, and eventually it sounds like he's intending to use her later on for something else, which is even more disturbing. But like, there's no genuine like love and admiration or enjoyment he gets with being with her. It doesn't seem. It all seems very fake and very like he's like it's like it feels performed, and that to me I don't feel that so much with him with Paul because he genuinely wants Paul to do this with him, and I don't know if that really is so much he has respect for Paul so much as this is his colleague and his friend, and he doesn't want to be at odds with his friend, despite the fact that he knows that if it comes down to it, Paul doesn't want to do it. He's not going to not do it because Paul doesn't want to do it. He's going to do it with or without him. But he does genuinely want Paul, not just because he needs Paul to operate certain things with him, but he genuinely wants his colleague back, his friend back.
I don't read
at least
that.
that's the way that it plays to me in certain scenes where he's talking to Paul.
I always feel like having Paul around makes things easier for him, and it makes the odds of things going well much better for him. But it's not that like having Paul around makes things, it doesn't make him happier or like it's his friend at the end of the day. I would say so at the beginning of the Fallout. He'll be like, hey, maybe whatever. But you could also interpret that as don't make this tougher for me. Like I'm trying to get this done. Why are you getting between me and this? But by the end of the film, it's so much shown to me that like Paul is just somebody he respects, but if he's in his way, he's still in his way. With the maid, yeah, he sleeps with her, has an affair, but he doesn't love her. He's not gonna be like, oh yeah, whatever.
That's why he doesn't have a problem killing her.
Yeah.
Or getting her killed.
But he also doesn't respect her in any single way.
No, of course
like
not.
that's just a lust thing. That's all
he's an ass to her from the first time you see them on screen. Like
yeah, that's all she is. So killing her is no problem. But
literally one of the first things that she says to him is like, when are you gonna marry me? And she's like, he's like, what makes you think I'm gonna marry you?
Yeah.
It's like that's fucked up. But that to me is more so like looking at her like he has that affair with her. He doesn't care about her.
No.
So he just throws her away. He doesn't throw away Paul. And like, yeah, I do agree that there's a degree of that where that is respect. But I do think that there's a certain point in the movie where he's already succeeded. He doesn't need Paul anymore, but he still wants Paul there. That's why to me it does kind of land more like he does have. It may not be a genuine love in the way that you think that we would have with people, but there is an affection there that he wants Paul there. He wants him there. He doesn't need him there. He wants him there.
But I also don't think he wants Paul there because it's like, that's my friend. I want him there. I think it's more so he wants Paul there to be like, I did this again and I've proven you wrong. Again, I'm correct and you fucked it up. Like
maybe
it's to me, it always plays out like having Paul there showcases that not only does he respect Paul, but he's proven that he's better than Paul. And that's how I always read that personally. You can dissect a lot from their relationship.
I would say I never really read it as I'm better than you. Less so that and more so I will go where you won't. I have more ambition maybe to do this project or whatever, or I have more ambition to do this. Not necessarily like, oh, I'm smarter than you or anything like that. I think it comes down to maybe in some moments it feels like he has that arrogance about him. I mean, he's definitely a very arrogant character.
I don't think it's driven by saying I'm smarter than you, but it's driven by the fact that it's like
I will accomplish things.
Not even you.
You're afraid to cross a line. Yeah. I'm not.
A better way of saying it before saying like I'm better than you is that like even you can't stop me. Yeah. That's more so why like I feel like he wants Paul to come back is to say is just to rub it in his face that like nothing can stop me, not even you. I'd say Paul is the closest thing he has to real human emotion. Yeah. It's not, I don't think it is genuine love or anything of that, but It's the closest thing he has, and that's why when in the end he says, "I want Paul to come here to show him I still fucking did it. Like he can't stop me."
Well,
That's how that scene reads to me.
I think that scene to me almost is almost him chasing Paul's approval though, because the way that they've had that first interaction about the monster and how he's like, oh, he's just a fucking, he doesn't know what he's doing, and like he's a violent, grotesque, fucking sack of meat or whatever. The second one is him like showing like, hey, look, I improved him. Like he's better now. Like he follows my orders and all that stuff. Is him looking for Paul's approval to return to the project almost. He's just like,
I can
no,
understand reading it that way.
like I want you to see like I've done better this time. Come back, please. Come back to me. Let's do this together.
I can understand that. I still see it from a perspective of like, you thought he was just gonna be a mindless brute. Look what I've done. Look at my progress.
And he still is a mindless brute.
I can see how you'd say that. I do still love the fact where he's like,
I revised the point that I'm not saying maybe he loves Paul to any degree like a human being would, but I do think it's definitely the closest thing to love that
it
maybe
is
Victor
definitely
understands.
the closest thing. Yes.
I think it is a little bit more than respect. I think there is some level of caring, but it's not the way that like you and I would care about somebody.
Mm-hmm.
It's what he understands as caring, I guess. Also, one thing I did want to bring up, I know you were about to say something, but I was thinking about this when I started the movie was, do you think he wants to do this so badly because his parents died?
No.
Do you think that his mother dying at such a young age has any effect on it?
No, because the way that Victor interacts from the beginning, I could almost believe in some way she could be responsible for his mother's death, so it makes things easier for him. He shows no emotion towards his cousin, no emotion towards his aunt. The way he interacts with the closest thing he has to family, I would believe he acts the exact same with his family.
Yeah.
He seems more like a human being in the beginning of the film, but he still is definitely detached, which is why I think it's so inventive for the film to start out like that, because it shows he's still young, but he's still very driven. Why else would he reach out to Paul to have him be his tutor?
Yeah, I understand that.
I think that's a fantastic way to start out the film personally.
Yeah, it was just a thought. I didn't know how much I really actually like lended credence to it. It was just like an idea that popped into my head that I thought was interesting. So maybe he's like thinking like, oh, maybe like, I could learn how to bring back someone from the, it's kind of sounds like fucking Anakin. It's like, if I could control.
Well, a lot of the ideology from the prequels and Star Wars does come from horror films too.
Yeah.
That's the reason he cast fucking Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee in them.
Yeah. Yeah. I just thought that was an interesting idea, but then again, in the way that the character is characterized, I don't know why he would care that much. But also,
you never know. Maybe his relationship with his parents was vastly different. I just don't.
That's something we just don't know. Yeah. Also, can we talk about for a second the fact that he's going to marry his cousin?
It's not a big deal, really. It's like it's definitely an olden.
I know that in Victorian era, like it's a different society. It's just nowadays it's weird.
Is it really that weird though?
No, it's not something that ruins the movie. Like literally, the fact that they're describing her as his cousin could be ripped out of the movie.
Yeah,
like, it doesn't change anything. I just find it interesting that they do specify that it's his cousin.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh my god, fucking Alabama cousin fucking or something, but
yeah,
I just think that's interesting. But again, like I think that's not that abnormal in Victorian society, which I believe.
I don't know if she's related to him in the book or not either. Maybe
I have no idea. I haven't read it.
Yeah,
that's specified. Like that's not something that they go into in the 30s one or anything.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I thought that was weird.
I mean, also, it's definitely not.
Paul definitely wants her.
Definitely not the norm. Oh yeah, I always believe they end up together at the end.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of I'm not gonna read it this way. Like he lets Victor die so that he can have her, but
no, it's definitely not a selfish reason why he lets Victor die. But
it is a selfless way. He's giving up, at least in the film, only friend for the betterment of the world, essentially.
Yeah. Also, Elizabeth Rule's only personal attachment with anybody in the film is technically with Paul.
Yeah,
the emotions are genuine.
Yeah, she has more actual like connection to the character because Victor's barely around, at least on screen. Like
also he's not really Victor with her.
Yeah, they specify that he like she doesn't see him for like weeks at a time. It's just like that's not a relationship. That's y'all get married. That's not how you. That's bad.
I mean, it's arranged marriage. So
yeah, I know. Like I said, it's just like you're not gonna have a connection with that person. Whereas even though Paul is like trying to make her leave, like he's showing genuine care for her, whereas Victor could give a fuck less.
Victor threatens to use her in the experiment to Paul at the end.
Yes, which is what causes their big fight.
Yeah,
at the end. Yeah, this movie fucking rocks.
It really does.
Just like I remember the first time I watched it, like I liked it. And I talked to you about it afterwards. I'm like, yeah, I really like this movie. It's really good. And then I rewatched it. I'm like, no, this is genuinely awesome.
The themes, the violence, like the idea of vengeance between like brothers.
Yeah,
It's so strong. And I can't understand people don't really like this film as much. I don't think the creature design is awesome. I like the first scene where he unwraps,
I'll
but
say this because I think that was a point that I brought up to you when I first watched it was like, yeah, I don't think that the creature design is very good, but
I think
after watching it, I'm like it's good because
yeah.
it looks like a thing that was stitched together in a lab. It doesn't
Yeah.
look like I love the James Whale makeup, and to me, not James Whale makeup, but the makeup from his movie. I love that iconic Frankenstein monster look, but that movie is definitely a lot more fantastical in a lot of ways. Whereas this one, they kind of want to make it as disturbing looking as possible, at least at the time, and it looks like something that Victor stitched together out of pieces of a person that got fucking like hit by a car,
Yeah.
and it looks pretty disgusting. And I actually love it this time around. I don't love it more or less. I think it's different and it's a different take, and it really works. And also, it works very well for Lee's face.
Yeah.
And
100%.
how expressive, like the first shot of the monster where he just locks eyes with Frankenstein, and you see that like instant switch flipping of him being like, I'm gonna fucking murder this person. It's like the first person I saw is like impulsively, I need to murder this person. And I wonder, is that because he just felt the kind of fucking vibes that character was giving off to him? He's just like, no, this guy's dangerous. I gotta kill him. It's probably not that. It's just an interesting way of looking at it. But that the monster makeup's sick. I love it. I even like it when after he gets shot in the face.
Well, when I say I don't like the design, well, I do like the design, first of all. I like the design in general. I don't love it because I think the creature's face is great. It's the rest of him. Because the
Yeah.
design is not just face and hands or whatever. He gets a fucking pea coat for like the rest of the film. And
Yeah.
I don't love that. It's pretty boring. Because even with the iconic makeup, I think Jack Pierce does it for
Jack Pierce,
Frankenstein. It's not just that. It's also the costume looks great too and tattered
Yeah.
and torn. You can't make him look like a mummy the entire film. I understand that, but give him something that looks more unique. Make the peacoat banged up. Make it look like it went through a fucking thresher or something. His
Yeah.
head, after by the end of the film, it has the section cut out for the brain, and I love that because his hair looks all it looks like a shitty wig. The hair looks pretty bad to me most of the film, but when they shave it off and it's got that little section out, it's like that's cool. It's more distinct and it's more real because it's so funny
for
to
the first
think.
section, that's actually Christopher Lee's hair.
Yeah,
It's actually his hair.
it's just so dark.
They show behind the scenes photos of them applying the makeup. It is actually his hair.
It's so dark it looks fake.
That's just his hair was black when he was younger.
No, good
His
for
hair is
him.
just super black. No,
The
later
biggest-
on I agree because they shave it.
The biggest thing I like about the shaving part is that he cosmetically looks weird, but how fitting for the character of Victor Frankenstein to just cut out a portion of his head and leave the rest of it absolutely normal because he doesn't fucking care about him.
Yeah, because it's
It's
to him.
perfect.
He's like, I created a being.
Yeah,
It's just a being though. It's not a person. So I don't
he doesn't
care.
give a shit what he looks
Well,
like.
even if it was a person, he still wouldn't care. It doesn't matter. It's his creation. It's his property, essentially.
I would have loved one scene where he just looked in a mirror and saw his face and just went fucking wild.
That would be cool. Yeah,
That
I
would have
agree.
been great.
That would
But
have been a nice scene. But,
yeah,
like,
I just think the costume should have been different. Something of a bit more flair, especially with look at the costumes that everyone else wears when they have these set pieces and costumes that look more like they're from an olden century, and he just has a pea coat. It's like, come on, dude, something a little bit more unique, please.
I would argue it almost makes him look more lowly than everybody else, and I
Yeah.
kind of dig that. But I mean, they could have done something more to dress the costume up a bit more. But I do like the idea that they dress him up purposely more lowly to put him below Frankenstein and everybody else.
I understand. I think they should have tattered it up at least a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Make it a bit more unique.
One of the things about the makeup actually I found really intriguing is that when I watched it, I'm like, I was looking at him when he walked out of the woods, in the peacoat, first time you see him in the peacoat,
Yeah.
and you could see below his neck. You can see that that's where the makeup ends, and it's just his body.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I don't like that, but then I was thinking about it. I'm like, no, you know what? He's just a fucking head stuck on a body.
But
So-
he's technically, I mean, we assume we never see the head. We know the eyes are different.
yeah, the eyes are new,
Yeah.
but the rest of it, like he's got all these scars. Like they obviously stitch all that back together
Yeah.
again, so his face is all fucked up. But the body is the guy who was hanging, And
Yes.
that was not affected. They said like the only thing that happened was that they went to the face, so they cut the head off and they replaced
Yeah.
it. So that all that like the body being fine, I can get behind that.
100%. I
So like
just think
the fact that it just cuts off at his neck where they attach to the neck, I kind of can get behind it. It's 100% a limitation of the makeup at the time, and it's not intentional, I'm sure. But in my head, I can at least work that out where it works in my head, so
but
it doesn't
still
take me out of
the
it.
narrative lends itself to making that acceptable too at the
Yeah,
same time. If you're going to have limitations, have the narrative explain those limitations so you as a viewer aren't jarred by it. And I think that's smart.
yeah, they
I
deliberately
just
make
think
sure to
some of
tell you
the
that.
makeup for the neck should just make it look a little bit more hanged, not just like a big red like blotch.
Yeah,
But that's just like a very minor thing that doesn't really bug me. It's more like a, oh, okay, it is what it is.
yeah. I was surprised by how like my big turn on the makeup this time around, because I remember I told you like I really don't like. I think you look stupid back when I watched it the first time, and now I watch it like I really like it.
I think it's
So
different when you feel like you have to pay attention or notice things in the movie. The smaller things kind of become bigger and you notice a lot more nuances that you don't when you're first watching it in a more relaxed viewing. So I think it's a good thing about talking about stuff like this because I already love the movie, but I'm picking up on small things Cushing's doing when he's acting, and
yeah.
now it doesn't become a great performance, becomes a fantastic performance.
Yeah, and same thing even with the monster, because we were talking about like the first time I watched it, like I didn't really care for Lee's version of the monster, but now I actually really enjoy his version of the monster. It's not the
Oh yeah.
same, like it does it's doing its own thing, but I like that thing it does. So
Yeah, I would say early in the film when he does just look like a killing machine to everything, like the old man and the kid, I start to really feel like this is what you're gonna do. Like that's so lackluster. But when it all comes to the scenes where he's telling him to sit up and stuff, in Lee's body motions of trying to move, they just feel so authentic and real. And you feel like I can't believe in a film where he plays like a makeup filled fucked up creature and he's getting more acting out of this one scene than he did in almost anything else in the fucking Hammer films. It's astounding. He makes that scene just unforgettable. I couldn't believe it.
to me though, like that's a great scene, but honestly the scene with the blind man really gets me, because
Yeah, I
because it
can see
really
that.
it really is just like he's not there to hurt the blind man. He's not there to hurt anybody. It's when he feels threatened that he lashes out against him, and the kid gets there when he's in his rage and assumedly kills him too.
I also
uh
like to think of in the 31 version, he can at least grunt. This one doesn't. He doesn't make a sound. The only sound he makes is when he screams at his death.
well,
But
he also makes a sound when he goes to kill Frankenstein the first time.
does he? Okay.
Yeah, he makes like a groan or a grunty kind of noise.
But he doesn't make it it's not like a common thing.
Yeah.
When in Bride of Frankenstein, when the monster talks to the blind man, he can at least grunt so he can show he's not threatening, but he's there.
Oh, I love that fucking scene.
But in this movie, there's nothing he can say. He can't relay any type of emotion or anything in general.
Yeah.
So it's more believable. It's like, oh, well, if you're a blind man, you could hear someone nearby, but they say nothing. That's way more terrorizing than just hearing random
Yeah.
grunts.
So you can understand it from both
You can't
perspectives.
read anything.
Yeah, you can understand from both perspectives. Well, not understand it so much, because what the monster does is still objectively wrong, but
You can't understand it though. You
you
don't
can
have to
understand
agree
its
with it, but you can't
mindset.
understand it.
You can understand its mindset, but it's not something that you can get behind as far as perspective is concerned. But the blind man is just defending himself, and he can't see, so he's already handicapped in a situation where he has to fight for his life. So he doesn't know what's going on. He's just trying to make sure that no one's trying to rob him or something.
Are
And
they
the
gonna steal his
monster,
fucking stick?
yeah, I guess so. All his firewood, bro, or his pipe, bro. He just steals tobacco. But from the monster's perspective, it's like the whole movie, the monster is dehumanized. Like he's treated as lower than human. So he doesn't do anything that resembles human interaction as far as speak. Like he obviously can't speak. He does barely even makes a sound, because it just like again, like he's not human to everyone around him. Whereas like in like Bride of Frankenstein, especially, like the blind man doesn't know that this is a fucking monster. He's
You
just
wouldn't care.
it's someone who is mute. So he's just
Yeah.
trying to teach him how to speak. So and also again, like teaching the monster that there are good human beings. Where in this movie, the only good there really aren't good human beings that he interacts with other than the blind man. But the blind man again still represents a threat to him because he has the stick and he's trying to hit him with it.
Well, also the little girl that he murders.
No,
Isn't it
in I don't
Curse?
remember him. in Curse. The little kid.
Yeah.
You talk about the little kid because the little kid, like the
Well,
little
I thought you were
kid.
just talking like there's no good human beings in the original Frankenstein universe except for the blind man and the little girl. Really,
No,
damn.
but like the blind man and the little girl are the ones that, yeah, like they are like good human beings that teach him that like people aren't all mean and
Yeah.
aren't all gonna hurt you.
In Curse, there's really nobody that shows that they would trust him.
There's no compassion towards this. Even Paul, who is the voice of reason throughout the movie, he's not even showing compassion to the monster.
Yeah.
Like well, the only compassion that he's showing to the monster is essentially putting it out of its misery,
Yeah.
which to him is like, okay, this person, even the best person in the room doesn't treat me like I'm a person.
Yeah.
So his violent tendencies to me are completely understandable, despite the fact that I don't agree with them. Like, obviously, I don't think that he should be, fucking killing people. But when you're not treated like a human being, he's just a monster at that point. Even like Paul literally calls him a monster. It's just like, yeah, he's a monster. I get it at that point. That's why, like, I do really genuinely enjoy this version of the monster. It's different, which is what I mean. They legally couldn't do the same things. But I do appreciate the fact that we have two different Frankenstein movies where the Frankenstein's monster is completely different. One thing I really want to touch on, we haven't even talked about yet, is actually the set design, the visuals, the cinematography, and all that stuff, because this is kind of like a staple of Hammer horror, is the way that they look. Because Terrence Fisher did a bunch of them.
He directs like usually the first in the franchises, but he doesn't do many after that.
Yeah, I don't know if he did do Curse of the Werewolf too, but the sets are always so lavish, like they look so incredible, and the choice to shoot in Technicolor, it brings such a vibrance to the film in every aspect. The colors on the costumes look incredible. The color on the sets, the amazing upholstery on the fucking furniture and all that stuff, but also because these movies really leaned into a bit more of a more risque version of these movies for the 50s, at least for that time period. The blood is super vibrant. It's crazy how just bright the blood is. And it's like, yeah, this one has it a bit. Like when Frankenstein gets shot, or when the monster gets shot, and when he cuts the fucking guy's head off and puts it in the acid, you get a little bit of blood here and there. But I think in particular, I mean, this isn't for this movie, but Hammer's version of blood is the dripping of the blood on Dracula on the
From
head
the
center of it.
intro.
Yeah, it just looks so fucking gorgeous. I don't know what it was about Hammer horror, man, but like the way that these movies look, it's otherworldly at times. It's so fantastical, especially with like Dracula, because they have these like big gigantic shots of these matte paintings, and like, again, like all the blood and the lavish sets, the color on the costumes, like it looks so vibrant and beautiful. I love the way that these movies look.
I will just say that I was wrong. For most of the Frankenstein films, Terrence Fisher does direct them. Actually,
Most
not
of
the
most of the
Dracula ones though.
Frankensteins.
Most of the Frankensteins he does them,
Oh wow.
but yeah, he even does like Frankenstein Creates Woman and like all those, even like farther in the entries. But yeah, I think the biggest thing about why we don't talk about it is because it's just so synonymous. You know what I mean? Like everybody knows it. Everybody says like, oh yeah, this and that. It's not like it's not great. It's fantastic. And one of my biggest things about griping about Bram Stoker's Dracula was that all these sets have no heart or meaning to them because they're not being interacted with by the actors. But in these films, the actors interact with everything. And Peter Cushing touches every piece of equipment he has in Curse of Frankenstein, which makes it all feel genuinely real or being tinkered with.
Paul walks into a room, picks up a book, opens it up, reads a couple pages of it,
Exactly.
sits down, touches the brandy, dumps into the
Like,
cups, and all that stuff.
you know how when you're watching an animated movie or animated show, you know what's in the background, what's in the foreground because it'll be drawn.
Yeah.
Well, the big problem is in Bram Stoker's Dracula, everything feels like it's in the background. But in these movies, everything's in the foreground because they're getting touched, they're being interacted with, they're being used. You get a fucking old goddamn German man getting pushed over the railing. Like
Yeah.
Everything is being interacted with. Everything is being utilized in these sets.
I'll say that's actually one moment in the movie that kind of like I was like, oh yikes, that doesn't look so good. Is when he gets pushed off and he hits the fucking floor on his head. You can see the floor is like cushioned and it depresses.
Yeah.
But
I just
whatever.
think he has a
It's
really fucking big head.
There's a little teeny tiny little fucking gripe to have. I'm not gonna take off
I
points
love
for
that
that.
scene
That's
though,
just,
because it looks like he fucking broke his
yeah,
head. He
he
looks like he
goes
broke his neck.
he falls hard. Him just fucking crashing through the banister and all that stuff.
It feels like a real person just fell though.
Oh yeah.
A lot of times when you watch films like that, it's like, oh, they used a fucking mannequin or they used some other fucking stupid shit.
No, it was 100% a stunt man.
Yeah, like
You can see
it
his
looks
face.
so painful.
Yeah, he drops all like fucking 8 feet or whatever. It's
Jesus
ridiculous.
Christ.
Yeah, no, it really does work, and it's actually kind of funny because he lands on his head, and it's kind of funny because it's like Paul. They make a big deal about how Paul fucking smashes the glass and puts it through the fucking brain or something. He fucking
Yeah.
land on his head. That's a lot of head trauma. That brain was
Yeah,
already
but
fucked
you
up
could
when he pulled it
also
out.
say that, and I thought the same thing. It's like, well, this guy fell fucking head first.
Yeah,
But when he's inspecting the brain, he doesn't notice any abnormalities or any bruising or damage to it.
I agree. Like I understand that, but at the same time, if you really think about it, there should be.
There should be, yeah, 100%.
That's what I mean. It's like, yeah, I agree. Like they deliberately make it so like, oh yeah, there's no bruising, it's all perfectly fine, puts it in the bag, all stuff are good.
Yeah.
But if you really think about it, like that guy fell 8 feet head first onto his fucking face. His brain is gonna get crushed. So there would probably be damage to the brain already, but they talked that away. And then they smashed the glass into it.
What if they just brought him to like his lab, like, oh, check this out, and he's like looking at something, he just swings a big axe in the neck.
Just puts it on the table, puts a little, gives him a little bit of a drug, and he just fucking starts sawing.
Might be a little tougher to explain to people. Oh, how did he get his head cut off? Oh, he was messing with my teapot. I don't, like, what's he gonna say?
Yeah, no, I like it's definitely a necessary way to do it. I just think it's funny that he literally lands directly on his head.
Oh yeah,
and has no head trauma before the glass. That's amazing. But yeah, no, like it is like everyone knows that the Hammer movies are just like gorgeous pieces of film.
But I just
it's
love
always
it because they keep it simple.
Yeah,
they keep it so simple. There's really only like 2 to 3 locations in this entire film, but it doesn't feel small. It feels still very grand.
And that's also a really important thing because they always refer to Hammer as the House of Horror. And until recently, like I didn't even realize like they literally mean a house of horror. Like for like Curse of Frankenstein, especially, and for Horror Dracula, they have this house that is their production studio, and they just use this house to make these movies, and that's insane. And the movies show for like it's the budget for this was like $500,000, but my god, do they I mean back then that's a whole hell of a lot more money than it is now, but the just the quality
7 it's still not a crazy amount of money though, still, even in 57
for movies, because like they like $1 million was just like that's like practically 200 million dollars these days. So that would be a huge that would not be a small movie, but it wouldn't be a huge movie either. But just them shooting it all on set in that house, they're not paying to build lavish, extravagant, giant sets. They made money back on their investment hand over fist. Like they made a lot of money off of this movie. This and Horror Dracula.
It'd be around like 6 million.
Yeah, that's a small movie nowadays.
Yeah, so it still wouldn't be crazy for a budget.
That's less than what they paid to make Invisible Man.
And that's assuming for 1950 too.
That's less than Invisible Man. It's less than the new Halloween. That's a small movie nowadays. Very small.
That pisses me off, man. Just make good fucking movies. Just make them personal. Make it small scale. I don't need to see a fucking giant amount of different aerial locations. You could shoot it like the old Dark House takes place in one location.
Yeah,
it's fucking awesome.
Same thing with
I miss stuff like that so much.
You can still find them; they're just rare.
Yeah, or it's just like indie studios too that do a lot of stuff like that. Yeah, like you'd be surprised what you can do with limitations, that people always forget that shit.
Like, have you seen?
I just wish bigger studios would try that too once in a while.
Like, have you seen Buried with Ryan Reynolds?
I've seen part of it actually. Yeah.
His movie takes place completely in a fucking coffin. That's nuts, dude. That's fucking crazy, and it's awesome. It's a great movie.
There's just something great about, to me, having a big mansion and having the entire movie take place in this mansion and unfold. That's kind of why I like most of even like Knives Out, most movie takes place in that mansion.
Yeah.
I kind of don't like when it's not in the mansion. It doesn't ruin the movie or anything, but like when things are in the mansion, things feel way more tense, way more real. When you take it out of the mansion, it's almost like, oh, that kind of sucks, man. It's necessary for the film, and it definitely has to be like that for some scenes, especially. But there's something so cool about a cohesive, tight plot that takes place in one location, and it feels so secluded and so claustrophobic that as the film goes on, it's like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
Yeah, and it's like they always reference the village. You never see the village. It's always, I'm gonna go tell the village, and they don't go tell the village. It's always like the house inside the building, and then the surrounding forest. That's the setting for the movie. It's very economical filmmaking, and
Smart.
is very smart, especially because like they maximize their budget for the things that they were doing. Like the sets, the stuff that they built inside the house are incredible, especially like the laboratory. The laboratory is so fucking cool.
It's
It
only
is
two rooms too.
yeah, it's one
It's
of the
so amazing that
coolest.
it's 2 rooms.
Yeah, it's one of the coolest looking fucking laboratories I've ever seen. Yeah, it's just, oh my god, it's such a gorgeous, the rooftop part, like towards the end where you finally see that, like the rooftop, the final showdown, awesome looking set too. It's such a fucking good looking movie. And like, yeah, like you said, like it's something that everyone talks about when we talk about horror, Hammer horror. But it's something that, like, yeah, we talk about a lot for a reason, because it's amazing what they did, what they accomplished
It's
with.
bright, it's powerful, it's poignant, and it's simple.
Yeah, and it's the return of the Gothic. All the architecture, like it's such a, oh my god, it's such a fucking great looking movie. And all of the choices they make from a set perspective and costuming, it's just like it really helps you cement yourself in that place.
All right, man. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Curse of Frankenstein is a fantastic horror movie. It is filled with amazing performances, particularly from its two leads. The
3 leads,
costuming,
really.
yeah, if you count the monster too, but like all the acting is great. The sets are amazing. The Technicolor filming is just so beautiful. It's just such a great looking movie. The character of Victor Frankenstein is a villain for the ages, and he's your protagonist. It's just such a incredible film that I think every horror fan should watch eventually. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much all I can say.
Curse of Frankenstein is a film that came out in 1957 in an age where they're trying to put more color on screen, push new boundaries, and do it in a way that didn't seem like it was about a gimmick. And at that time, it's totally a gimmick. You know, you don't see this much Technicolor blood splattering. That's more poignant in a film like Horror of Dracula, but Curse of Frankenstein takes that type of ideology, runs with it, keeps things simple, keeps it with a strong narrative, and keeps you invested. I think any Frankenstein film would showcase that the monster is important, but the monster inside Victor is just as diabolical. But no film gets that better than this Frankenstein. And that's why I think it's necessary to see not only Cushing's performance, but everyone else as they interact with this terrible monster of a human being. And I would definitely recommend it.
I think it's a great companion piece to watch with those old Universal movies, because it is such a change in perspective.
Especially the first Frankenstein and Bride, because those two films do pretty much coincide together.
Yeah, it's a completely different way of looking at the story. I think that watching them together is an interesting evolution of this property that has been timeless.
I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We're going to have more outtakes coming up on the YouTube channel. We're going to have a pretty consistent schedule, releasing the audio Thursdays on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff on Anchor. But we're going to consistently post the video format on Fridays. So if you look forward to that, check it out on Fridays. If you like just hearing our voices, check it out on Thursdays. Outtakes, look forward to that on Saturdays. And I think that pretty much covers everything. Thank you so much for everyone joining in, and we'll see you next time.